Hello there and welcome. I'm Ole Brøgger and today we're going to build a Pringles Tower. I've seen a lot of these Pringles Towers around the internet and I thought maybe now it's time for me to build one. I am going to build a Necromancer's Tower and it will be in the theme of the underworld I've been making in my previous videos. I also found this foam in a German hobby store and I'm going to laser cut it. At least I'm gonna try. I don't know the result yet, but let's see how it goes. I also have some Army Painter scrap foam here, and that's pretty much it. So why don't we just get started? First, I went into Inkscape and made this pillar. It is pretty easy to work with Inkscape. You just pull some lines and make a design that you like, and if you stroke it with red, the laser will cut it. But this is the next problem. I think my laser is too powerful to cut this and it will just melt the foam, but let's see how it goes. I also designed some smaller pillars just to give the tower a more interesting look. And now we're ready to cut. And look at this. This is real-time footage. It took me a while to dial it in. Sometimes it just melted the foam as I predicted, or it didn't cut all the way through. I could have done a second pass, but I was afraid it would just melt the foam again. This is the smaller pillars, sped up 10 times, and it was pretty fast to cut as well. I got 6 big pillars and 6 small pillars. I cut off the beveled edge of the Pringles pipe. This is so the pillars would stay flush to the pipe. I want to have a small platform on the top of the tower, so I used some of my scrap foam to cut out a circle that would fit inside the tower. I didn't cut a perfect circle, so I needed to use some sandpaper to smooth it out. With a pencil, I made some texture and lines that would be very interesting to look at. To make sure that the platform wouldn't fall into the pipe, I had to build support that I could put inside the tower. To make sure the support would stay in the middle, I cut out a couple of pieces of foam and hot glued them in. I've printed out a circle divided into 12 pieces, and with a tiny drop of hot glue I would make sure that it would stay in place. This is so I'm sure that the pillars will have the same distance between them. And it didn't take long to install all 12 pillars with some hot glue. I noticed that some of the edges of the pillars were a bit crooked and melted, so I used a side cutter to trim it down. And now it's time to prime it up. I used this Ruins and Cliffs from the Army Painter. This spray is safe to use with foam since other sprays can melt the foam. I set it to dry overnight and then I used this AK Dark Earth texture paint. This will give it a more interesting look and at the same time it will cover up some of the hot glue tracks. To paint it, I used my airbrush with some various colors. Here's the Thunderstorm from the Army Painter Air series. And then I moved up to some more bluish, purplish colors. I put on a face mask since I was going to use my pan pastels. I used some blues and purples and some whites for the highlight. On the platform I used some speed paint from the Army Painter Thunderbird Blue. This was just to put it in the riffles. And then I dry brushed it with some dark gray and some Necromancer flesh for the highlights. And now this little guy have a place to do his dark magic. At this point I actually thought I was done. But then I got this crazy idea. Hey, I want to install a plasma light ball. For this I had to do some modifications. I had to trim down the base because it was too big to fit in the tower. And I had to cut out the platform I just painted and installed. And I had to cut a hole in the bottom of the platform so I could use a dowel to plunge out the platform. Okay, let's see what's inside this plasma ball. It has a battery compartment and it can run on DC 5 volts. But I don't want to use that, I just want to use the battery compartment. Inside we have a circuit board and some wires. and of course the light bulb itself. All of this will need to be removed. This is pretty easy, just to remove 2 screws and the circuit board is out. I want to keep the battery compartment, but it is too big, so I will also need to trim that down before I can install it in the tower. The light bulb itself is pretty easy to remove. It is just press fit inside a rubber gasket and you can just pull it out. I used my bandsaw to trim down the base to the right size. I also had to remove the wires from the battery compartment and of course mark it up so I could install them correctly again. And then back to the bandsaw so I could trim down the battery compartment. And now it fits perfectly inside the tower. I removed the 5V DC connector and now I just had to prepare the wires and solder them back into the battery compartment. I used some hot glue on the circuit board so I could attach it to the battery compartment. The high current wire that goes into the bulb is a bit long, so I had to come up with an idea to make some spacers and attach everything together. For this, I used some coffee stir sticks and some hot glue. It didn't look like something that was built by an engineer, but who will tell? It will be inside the tower and no one will ever notice. This is it? Or, yeah, actually, this project took a weird turn for me because I started out, hey, I want to build a Pringles Tower and I want to laser cut something. And it was a pretty simple build. You don't need a laser cutter to make this. You can cut it by hand. I just used the laser cutter because it was easier and I could make some more consistent pillars here on the side. I kept the platform because I want to use it for a necromancer in my campaign. But the plasma ball, I think the idea is awesome. And I have seen it on some images on Facebook where people use this plasma ball in some kind of setup with a magic tower and platforms and other stuff. And I thought this would be great for my tower. So I did it. And it made it a bit more advanced. I'll show you some close-up, but thank you so much for watching and I'll see you soon.